Vivian will know.
Remember, it was such a terrible wild night, wasn't it, when we went last year?
So it was 361 days ago that I was elected Mayor of Bristol. And I took office actually on the 19th of November, on Monday the 19th of November, after the weekend after that election. And on the 18th, I will be giving my State of the City, what I've described as annual speech. Well, it'll be the first annual one, at the university, in case you feel you haven't had enough tonight. And it was an extraordinary day to be elected. I was only half expecting it. I wasn't expecting it until a few days before the election. The reason I stood, and I did stand to win, is that I felt Bristol desperately needed a new form of leadership. I felt that we had not taken full advantage of the wonderful city that we are and the wonderful position we are in, and that we'd been plagued by ever-changing politics. And this is not criticism of individuals. I think there are some really good individuals who stand for the council and play a part in the council. But when you have annual elections, people are bound to play politics, and they play it all the time. So one of the first things I did when I got elected was absolutely insisted that we took a motion to the council that we have all-out elections every 4 years from 2016. And that, I think, will immediately change the way people behave on the council and stop that eternal party politicking and electioneering that I think has been the cause of holding us back. I didn't think Bristol would be given the opportunity to have a mayor, so I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about it. I'd got right out of party politics in the 80s. I'd stood as a parliamentary candidate when I got a bit angry about things in Bristol West. Some of you may remember that. But in 1987, I decided I won't do it again, and I stopped all political activity and decided I will try and change my little world in different ways, through architecture, through regeneration, through social entrepreneurship, through cultural entrepreneurship. And I felt always so privileged to be in a city where I could do that. And I feel I owe an awful lot to this city that I arrived at as a student in 1965 in an old Morris 8 that I bought for a tenner prior to MOT. I was immediately struck. I decided I desperately wanted to come to Bristol. I didn't want to go to a university that was just a university. I wanted to come to a proper city, and I played a part in that city right from day one as being a student based in Great George Street. But so when the opportunity did come up for Bristol to decide to have a mayor, I thought, well, I will help make this happen through the referendum. And it was during that referendum then people started saying, well, what sort of person is going to be a mayor? And I just thought it would be the worst possible thing if we do make this decision and yet we end up with more of the same. And so my name had occasionally been canvassed by the local media, and then people in the campaign decided to put a bit of pressure on me and said, we'll have more chances in the referendum if there's an example of somebody who would stand. So I said I would, and I would make it absolutely clear that I was standing as an independent with only one purpose, and that is to improve Bristol. And I think if you're really clear that that's your purpose and you're not playing any political games, it's an easy thing to concentrate on and an easy thing to do in terms of the sell. But you can't win just by selling a message. I felt it was I had to gather people around me. I had to, from scratch, make up the sort of organisation that a party has in order to be able to get the message across the city. And those people helped me an awful lot, not just in the messaging, but in the thinking about what this role is. So I arrived, actually, after that election, feeling perfectly at ease with the job. I wasn't in shock. I think others were. My opponents were in shock because it was technically impossible. You couldn't win without a party machine. But I felt it was a gift that people were showing that in order to win, they needed to bring down ministers and shadow ministers and support from the centre. And my whole argument actually was that Bristol is great on its own. It should make its own decisions, and it shouldn't have the strings pulled from Westminster by whatever party or influence. And so it was, I think that in a way, they won it for me. They just demonstrated exactly what I was saying. And so I arrived in my office, given a political office on the political floor, and I thought, no, I don't want to be on the political floor, I want to be on the executive floor. So moved my office to the executive, and so the whole executive, with the chief executive, now the city director and others, become in effect the mayor's office. And we can plan together the best way of taking Bristol forward. And I think while I've not achieved everything in the first year that I would like to have done, I actually think I probably achieved more than I felt was likely in the first year. And I think the biggest achievement, and one that desperately needed doing, was changing the mood. People recognising that that the city council and its leadership represented them, which was why I made the slightly trivial move. It may have seemed like a trivial move of changing the council house to City Hall, saying this doesn't belong to the council, it belongs to the city, it belongs to the citizens of Bristol, who I refuse to call customers, I call them citizens. And that they are very much part of the governance themselves. And I think that change of mood is really important. But I was faced with some very big challenges. Straight away, I had to make £35 million worth of cuts. That was about 7 million more than was predicted up to the date of the election. And I had to do it very fast. And to be honest, I didn't have the time to do it in a fundamental way. So it was salami slicing. It was saying, well, let's take a bit out of here, a bit out of here. Some of the work had been done already, but nevertheless, I had to make the decisions following a slightly token consultation process at that time. And I felt next time we do this, we've got to do it in a much more thorough manner. I didn't realise that next time we do it, it will be 90 million. It's 90 million I've got to take out over the next 3 years, and I've decided that we will have a 3-year budget. So instead of salami slicing, we go as far back to basics as we possibly can in seeing how could we build up a budget from zero. Well, you can't actually do that because there are loads of existing contracts and what have you. But I feel it's a much more healthy exercise building up a budget rather than salami slicing one down. And some of you may have heard yesterday I announced that we will be taking up to 1,000 jobs out of the City Council, which is less than might have been when you consider that we have to reduce our budget by about 25% and we employ 7,500 people. But nevertheless, that's tough. So when people ask me if I enjoy this job, I say, well, it's not all joy, but I thrive on it. It's, there's no greater privilege than being given that responsibility. So it's not only, and the budget will go out for consultation with some real choices, but some real hard choices are next Tuesday, next Monday night, basically, after I've given my speech. but nevertheless, there are some really positive things to do. So it's not all gloom. And I actually think when you're forced to think about that level of cuts, you've got to ask the question of yourself, what is local government for? You've got to be much more fundamental in your thinking than you would if you were able just to carry on with the same level of budgeting. And out of that thinking should come some positive things. Out of that thinking should come the answers to how you might do things differently, how you might rely a bit less on the centre, how you might enable people to do things rather than just doing everything for them. And so I think a lot of that thinking has been really important. Some other big challenges, as you will know, is that Bristol is relatively congested. That is costing us a huge amount of money. It's costing the local economy hundreds of millions of pounds a year. And it's something that has not been tackled in a fundamental way. And it was never going to be easy to tackle it. And naively, I felt that we got to go for this in one big move, because what we've been doing is eking it out because everybody had been too afraid. And I think we have to be bolder, we have to be stronger, we have to be more confident in the moves we take. I say naively because I think if I'd been more political, more Machiavellian about it, I would have taken some of those steps. I would have taken less big steps, not small steps, but less big ones, so that people could learn that when the pressure builds, they would that they would find some of those changes more acceptable. And of course, the big one was the residents' parking. But those sort of issues are not isolated issues. Even the whole transport issue is not an isolated issue. I'm not obsessed about transport. What I'm obsessed about is making this a really good, livable city, one that is a fair city, and I think fair in both senses of the word. We've got to bear in mind, we have a city where there's a near 10-year life, at least a 9-year life expectancy differential, depending where you live. Now that's that's just simply not acceptable. It's common of a lot of cities, but it isn't acceptable in a caring contemporary world. And one of the big contributors to that is air quality, and depending where you live, the air is less or better. And the biggest contributor to poor air quality is cars and diesel vehicles. So, but as I say, that's not just about transport. It's about health. It's about safety. It's about the future of our children. And so, there is not one issue that you can isolate. We are disgracefully behindhand in the building of new homes in this city. We are the most prosperous of all the core cities. We are the only city in England outside London that is above actually the only city in England of the major cities that is above the average in terms of prosperity. So we should be taking full advantage of that. But the problem is that actually means that when you're poor in a relatively rich city, you're even poorer. The affordability of housing is much lower. So I have immediately, one of my first steps was to make quite sure that we do everything we can to make a step change in the provision of housing. I mean, for instance, this last year, we will have only built, well under 100 affordable houses or homes, because some are flats. And the real need is about 1,500 a year. We're a growing city. We're one of the few cities that is growing in population. And it's a problem for us all. It may seem that it's only a problem for somebody without a home, but it's a real problem for us all. I said that you can't isolate any of these problems. People without a decent home, people who can't afford things, become a problem to the health services, and they become a problem to the police. So every single issue is connected. So what are the really positive things we can do to lift Bristol one level further up? I think if we concentrate on this issue of making it a livable city, if we make it a city that is really good for our children, because I absolutely believe if you make a city that's good for children, you make a city that's good for everybody. We know they get under your feet and sometimes they're a nuisance, but actually we love them really. And if you think about it, we've actually taken a hell of a lot away from our children. 2 generations ago, the playing area out of your front door might have been a mile or 2. A generation ago, it might have been half a mile. Now, it's the front doorstep. We have restricted the freedom of our children because of stranger danger and the perception of stranger danger, and of course of the domination of the car that has taken over all our streets. So forgive me going back to that, but I do think it is vitally important that we think about the sort of environment that we are giving our children and leaving for future generations. And so we've got this huge opportunity that I was incredibly lucky to be around for, was to be awarded the European Green Capital for 2015. That is, don't underestimate the opportunity that gives us. It gives us an opportunity to go that bit further in terms of making our city a livable one. It gives us the opportunity to promote all those industries. Our energy industries in Bristol are tremendous. We've got a huge low carbon industry, and are getting better known across the world for that. It gives an opportunity for all our creative industries, our high-tech industries, for our cultural offers to show themselves off to the rest of the world. And I'm absolutely determined that we use that as a plank for making quite sure that Bristol is recognised across the world. And I was in America 3 weeks ago, and we were getting very good notices for what we're doing. I was claiming we are the best city in the UK on a Wednesday and Thursday, in Pittsburgh and New York. On a Friday, suddenly in the Independent and the Telegraph, I read that we are the best city in the UK. And I was able just to send that back to all the people I've been speaking to, saying I wasn't joking. And next week, I go to China. I'm meeting the Prime Minister as part of a delegation of 12 European mayors, talking to the Chinese about, wait for it, their program for 200 new cities. And but I was in China talking with the Chinese a couple of times when I was RIBA president about their new cities, and offering them all the mistakes that we've made. We don't want to learn from your mistakes. We need to learn from our own mistakes. I said, well, that'll take you a generation and a half. It's taken us many generations to learn from our mistakes. And let's share them. We offer you our mistakes. Anyway, what is fascinating is now they're asking European cities to come and share with them the lessons of urbanisation. And I think the big lesson that I will be bringing is that a city of 500,000 is so much easier to make work than a city of many millions, and that Bristol is a very good model. So it's an opportunity to export the European model. And so I'm making absolutely no excuses for making these trips. The EU are actually paying for me to go. An American university paid for me to go to America. I did spend a bit more in making quite sure that I got to New York and talked to Bloomberg's office about what they were doing and that sort of thing. But I think what is, I think the downside of doing this job is the sniping that goes on. I will do what I think is absolutely best for Bristol. Nothing less, nothing more.